Good morning to the authorities from the Pete and the project and from GIZ. And along with Julio, I will be moderating both days for this event, and which is focused mainly on the data platforms, which is a very important topic to have a solid foundation for planning and for investments and actions, both to integral management of the water resources, but also to what has to be considered much more than before the management for solid waste or residuals in the context of clean water and sewage systems. Today's session, we will be focusing first in a presentation that has that will be presented by Maria Eugenia de la Peña regarding a platform that BIT is organizing in the region for what has to do with necessary data for our job. Uh, Now we will allow participants to ask questions regarding this presentation afterwards so that she can address those questions. Then we will have a short pause and that would lead us to the following two presentations for local experiences. And then we will have a panel discussion based on four questions that you all can see in the agenda that was sent to you. Since we had some technical issues in the morning, want to handle directly the word to Maria Eugenia, or she's a civil engineer from the National University, Autonomous University in Mexico, with a master's in environmental engineering from the Technical University of Hamburg. She's a senior specialist in the Inter-American Bank of Development based in Washington, where she participates in the design and execution on water projects and sanitation and sewage drainage in several countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. She also participates in the development of regional programs like the Initiative for Healing of Optimum Healing and Rural and Observatory in Latin America and Caribbean for the water and sanitation. The project called OLAS, promoting the incorporation of concepts like circular economy, water management in urban areas, and the use of sustainable systems for the urban sewage systems. So with that, I'll handle the floor to her. Thank you, Everhart, for the intro and for letting us present today on this initiative that I believe will grant some insights for the next couple days, or at least 2 days. I think you can see the presentation. I will be mm, sharing it here. Yes, as it was mentioned before, how
Okay, great. Thank you. Can I just ask that someone would be able to go through these slides when I say next because I don't have the option to do that from my phone. Hello?
Will do, Micah. I will forward them for you. Just let us know.
O- Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Micah De Pisa, and I'm pleased to be presenting on behalf of the Ministry of Public Utilities. I'd like to thank the GIZ for the opportunity for Trinidad to be able to share its experience in the implementation of our National Water Information Management System. Next slide. So just by way of background, in 2017, the government agreed to actively pursue Trinidad and Tobago's participation in the Caribbean Regional Fund for Water and Wastewater Management Program. The ministry, the MPU, who acts as a project champion, collaborated with the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Environmental Management Authority, as well as the Water and Sewage Authority, who is our local public water utility, to select projects to be executed utilizing financing from the CReW program. So the Trinidad and Tobago package was developed along the vein of three components. And under component one, which speaks to institutional policy and regulatory reform for integrated water and wastewater management, blossomed the development of the water information management system for water related data and information. And throughout this presentation, you might hear me refer to the Water Information Management System as WIMS for short. Next slide. So most countries, if not all, will agree that water is a foundational pillar for its country's well-being, economic development, and environmental sustenance, and as a result, must be protected and carefully managed. So, in looking at management, we acknowledge that at the core of this said management is measurement. And the problem that we were experiencing that is a current problem um, that arises is whereby water-related data is fragmented over various ministries and institutions, resulting in often inconsistencies in data management and then large gaps in decision making in our decision making processes. Then this fragmented data further perpetuates the culture of government institutions operating in silos. Additionally, just to give an idea of the justification of this project, um, we all know that the impacts of climate change are afoot and are expected to increase. In terms of Trinidad and Tobago, we have experienced very dry conditions over a number of years, with with our country experiencing an hydrological drought in 2010, and then the polar opposites where we experienced major floods in 2018 and 2019. So we see this as a pivotal um, chance to build climate resilience and adapt to climate change. And so that data that we use scientific data to help drive our decision making, and we would like that to be at the center of our planning and development moving forward. Further, we also think that this could just add to the improved outcomes of value adding projects that are currently being embarked in the water sector. Next slide. Thank you. So the WIMS, the Water Information Management System, also links directly to our national policy, whereby the government of Trinidad and Tobago, in its goal of improving the water sector, is committed to the management of the water resources of the country to provide not only a reliable water supply to meet present demands, but also in the vein of sustainability, ensuring that it meets the needs of future generations. But plans have to be made in order to achieve that goal. And one such plan is the Trinidad and Tobago's draft National Integrated Water Resource Management Policy, which states that the government will establish a standardized integrated electronic water resources information management system for the collection, processing, storage, analysis, and retrieval of information to inform decision-making process. Next slide. Oh, sorry. Oh, you went. No, sorry. You can go back to the previous slide. Yes. So the aim of this project is to develop a water information management system for water-related data and information that incorporates existing databases of all water sector stakeholders in Trinidad and Tobago to inform decision-making. Next slide. And we envision that this would result in a twofold outcome. Firstly, the portal will allow for one common user-friendly interface for the viewing and use of water-related data and information by external stakeholders. And secondly, internally on the back end, the water information management system will act as a centralized information hub that stores, disseminates, and analyzes data and information provided by all the relevant stakeholders. Next slide. So regarding the process, we are still in the early stages of this project, but a lot of work has been put in prior to the engagement of the consultant, and we at the ministry as well as the WRA decided to classify the work that's been done in this webinar along two lines, which is internally and externally. So getting into internally, the Ministry of Public Utilities and the Water Resources Agency, WRA for short, worked collaboratively to firstly conceptualize the project, ensuring to piggyback off of lessons learned from two existing similar databases that we have in the country. The first being the Coastal Information Management System that is housed at the Coastal Protection Unit at our Ministry of Works and Transportation, as well as the National Water Resources Database that is housed within the WRA. So after conceptualizing, the ministry also still works collaboratively with the WRA to develop the terms of reference for the consultancy, identifying the scopes and deliverables. And then after that, we also identified all the key stakeholders that we wanted to invite to form part of a working group. And the purpose of this working group is to develop the WIMS and provide technical oversight and guidance on the creation of the WIMS. Again, the WIMS is short for the Water Information Management System. So after the working group was established, they were invited to also review the project scope and deliverables to ensure that they were comfortable with it, and then it was then sent or to UNEP for advertising and to begin the process of engaging the consultants. Next slide. Sorry, next slide, thanks. Okay, so externally, UNEP provided guidance and feedback on the terms of reference for the consultants, and they also facilitated the advertising and hiring of the consultancy. As it stands right now, a consultant has not been selected as yet for the project, so we're a bit of a standstill. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of the working group, we see the working group as being vital and pivotal to the success of this project. Not only do they oversee the development of the water information management system, but in fact and in essence, they are the water information management system. In terms of the outputs of the WIMS is heavily dependent on the inputs, and each stakeholder will be responsible for maintaining such. More importantly, the success of the WIMS is largely dependent on the stakeholder operating as a whole, the stakeholders, sorry, operating as a whole, which, as I would have indicated earlier, is a vastly different modus operandi from what was described before, where each stakeholder generally operates in silos. So we envision that continuous input is needed by each stakeholder in order to build a database for real-time access and decision making, as well as this we think will has the potential to catapult a change in the operating procedures of the various ministries and institutions involved. And on the screen, we have a list of the members of the working group, and they were selected along the lines of the data that is collected by these institutions currently inform government decision making regarding water production for supply and demand management, the water resources in the environment, development activities such as major construction projects, drainage and disaster mitigation, as well as we acknowledge that many educational institutions would need to have access to this type of information for research purposes. Next slide, thanks. So just getting into the project scope, the project scope included the development of an open data portal with a web-based front end that facilitates access to current and historical water-related data in real time. We wanted the WIMS, again, the WIMS is the Water Information Management System, to act as a centralized data hub. And we also envisioned it to be very user-friendly and an intuitive platform, as well as be capable to operate among existing national information systems and databases. And aside from the more technical components, the scope included the need for a basic data governance framework that would include the processes, rules, and standards needed to ensure quality and security of data, as well as effective use of the information amongst all the stakeholders. Also, lastly, we saw the need for a very strong need for a knowledge transfer component, as well as minor statistical capabilities. Next slide, thanks. So the deliverables of the consultant that we developed in the terms of reference would be reviewing of existing information portals and user needs, designing the functional specifications of the system, procuring any hardware and software that is necessary, as well as along the way preparing progress reports, populating the database with the initial data sets, as well as developing standard operating procedures and data governance, the data governance framework that I just referenced, and importantly, so testing the information system, conducting training session and workshops with the stakeholders to ensure sufficient knowledge transfer, and then finally handing over a finalized product in terms of the platform. Next slide, thanks. So in the lead up to hiring the consultants, the ministry and the WRA saw the need for us to have a clear vision and understanding of what the WIMS should look like and entail. As well as we also saw the need to have an understanding of what the true capability of the system based on the information that these stakeholders collect and utilize. So having a true understanding of what the system is really capable of. So we thought it was beneficial because one, it will allow us to have, as I said, a clear vision in order to properly communicate our wants and needs to the consultant. And we also saw it as a way of saving time and as a means to hit the ground running when the consultant did come on board. So in the conceptualizing phase, as the first block on the screen, we would have met with the the two stakeholders that I previously mentioned that were the custodians of the two existing databases. And while what we learned was and while what we were able to glean from it was beneficial, from in terms of the lessons learned, um, I think more importantly, we made notes of the potential roadblocks that the projects that we may face along executing the project. So in terms of licensing, when it comes to proprietary software, storage and bandwidth may need to increase over time, and that will have to be budgeted for. In terms of infrastructure, that may be costly, and hardware and software that also may be costly, as well as not involving the ICT professionals from the beginning. We saw that there's a strong need for that. So moving on from that, when we formed the working group, we had meetings to discuss the project scope and finalize the TOR, which I would have mentioned before, but also very important and critical to the success of the project. We also saw the need for us to develop a terms of reference for the working group themselves. And it essentially acted as a means of an agreement between the stakeholders to commit to development, as well as just a way of them to understand their rules, the ministry rules, as well as the consultant rule when the time came fit. A very helpful exercise that we embarked on was a pre-scoping exercise with members of the working group. This was done to identify the types of data and databases that exist, how the data is stored, whether it be digital or physical, and as well as the expectations of the stakeholders. And what we learned was that not all data is digitized, and right now, as a country, we are a bit behind with respect to having our um, data and information digitized. And as well as we realize that these stakeholders, what we call as a wish list, may have been too extensive. So our solution to that was that we decided to start with the data that is readily available, and hopefully data can be added later. So we were hoping that the WIMs will be developed in such a way that when that data is digitized or is made available, it can easily be uploaded. As well as we saw the need to properly manage expectations through proper communication with our stakeholders. And then lastly, and with the hopes of it being simply that we are able to stick to the scope. Next slide. So the challenges that we have encountered so far, firstly, it has to do with time and budgetary constraints, specifically budgetary constraints surrounding procurement of hardware and software. The scope may be too ambitious for the budgets and time allocated. There was an instance where we engaged with the first consultant, and they would have told us that they were not able to commit to, they were only able to commit to the conceptualization, design, and implementation aspects of the project, and not to the data governance, the SOP development, and the training. And that was specifically linked to the budgetary and time constraints. So this resulted in the consultant declining the offer and contract, which equated to some time lost, unfortunately. Another challenge that or bump in the road that we are facing is that we saw that there is a need for local consultants to co-execute the project on the ground, as most likely, well, in the case of the first consultant that was engaged, they are foreign based, and this was not planned for in the budget. We are also realizing that it is not a one-person consultancy, that a team of persons may be needed to execute it. And more importantly, this challenge maybe shouldn't be phrased as a challenge, but I guess it is a challenge, it's an oversight on our end in the planning, is that we are we have realized that this is a largely a IT based project, and that more ICT professionals should have been included in the working group. Currently, we have two. One is supporting the Ministry of Public Utilities, and one is also supporting the Water Resources Agency. But we see the need for it to be that all the stakeholders that are members of the working group, that their ICT professionals should be involved heavily at this early stages. And well, the last challenge is that we are currently without a consultant. So the lessons learned so far is that it will be helpful for consultants to prepare a short summary of their proposed approach or a brief for review before they are engaged. As it stands, the consultant was selected on a ranking system, and then when the consultant, after they were engaged, was given the only after they were engaged, sorry, they were given the chance to discuss the project scope and deliverables and air their concerns in a sort of preliminary discussion type meeting that was held between the Ministry of Public Utilities and WRA, UNEP, and then the consultants. And in our experience, it was only at this stage when the consultant was already engaged that they were able to express their ability to deliver on the project. And in this meeting, the consultant proposed deliverables, um, unfortunately, didn't coincide with the project deliverables that we had defined, resulting in the consultant turning down the offer. And we are just a bit apprehensive that that process may also lead to, in the event a second consultant is engaged, that it may also follow the same footsteps, and then more time would be lost. So, continuing along with lessons learned, we realize that, and we are holding fast to the fact that data governance is, in fact, central to the sustainability of this platform, as it ensures stakeholders understand how the system works. We also thought it would have been valuable for us to have a look at similar projects to have an idea of the budget, because it was a bit difficult on our end to really identify what our budgetary needs would be. We also see that stakeholder involvement, as we said earlier, is key to the success of this project, as they are the custodians of their own distinct databases. And along the way, we realized that the project cannot encompass digitization of data sets, and that is something that will have to happen after the fact. And we also see the need for more discussion on the management of the system post implementation, whether it be identifying who will be the institution to manage the system, whether or not a department will have to be set up to, in fact, manage the system, or if that will be incorporated within each stakeholder's regular um, operating, or even with respect to bandwidth and infrastructure that may be needed as the WIMS expands. So too will have the broad bandwidth and the infrastructure would also have to expand to be able to keep up. And this just the next slide. So in terms of the next steps, UNEP has communicated to us the potential of a small-scale funding agreement between UNEP and the United Nations University Institutes for Water, Environment, and Health, where funds for 6 identified countries under the CReW program will be combined. It's it it has been communicated to us that it will still be maintained that it is a demand driven. It will be demand driven by each country, with the potential for a more harmonized approach. specifically because there will be a broader range of expertise at our disposal, as well as possibly co-financing. So currently we are awaiting the a detailed proposal from the other consultant that was approached by UNEP, who proposed this methodology, and it was also developed alongside UNEP. So we are awaiting their proposal, which will now luckily detail the methodology, approach, deliverables, budget, and timeline. And once agreed to by the 6 countries, we are assuming that this is the approach and this will be the next step. So after, as I said, after which the implementation should start. And so far, we have had a very good experience working with UNEP and by extension, the Cartagena Convention Secretariat thus far. And that has been our experience. As I said, we eagerly await implementation of the WIMS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikai, for this very interesting presentation, which shows us the process, how difficult sometimes it might be. Estoy hablando en inglés. Y tengo que volver al
Mikai, for this presentation. Very interesting. And it's demonstrating the challenges that currently exist in order to start a process of generating a platform and design it and create it and make it functional afterwards, so that every stakeholders that has even diverse expectations.
Speaking in English, sorry about that.
um, a ver, should I change to English?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about
Then
that. Yeah.
again, thank you very much for this nice presentation, which shows us how difficult it is sometimes to build up a process for generating a data platform and to fulfill the expectation of all the different stakeholders which are involved. So we will take this in account because it makes us very clear the challenges you face in terms of operating or trying to get into a operational system which will generate this platform in the future.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Now I will change again to Spanish because normally I do the moderation in Spanish, and you should perhaps switch to the channel where you can listen in English.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Estoy introduciendo en
And Environment Minister and Energy in Costa Rica. Jesus, we requested for him to tell us a little bit of his experience in Costa Rica regarding generating data and a data platform that allows the sector, the water sector, so the sanitation sector, to have what's necessary and enough, and perhaps it will even help more for the planning and the investments that the state and government of Costa Rica is thinking about to allocate in the sector and how to monitor the assignation or allocation of this and the advancements that are being achieved within the sector. So with that, I will hand the floor to Jesus for his presentation. Thank you very much for the Minai or the Minai entity. It's an honor to be here and share uh, our, our platform. Okay, looking for the changing. So I will be presenting the National Information System for Integrated Water Resources and Management. Okay, so now we're going to see experience and implementation, and to tell you a little bit on how it used to be. Uh, that's how I started in the sense of that we back then had a lot of paper documentation, regardless the fact that we had information. The majority of information was managed physically like this, and obviously it affected us, and it was very time consuming. Um, this took a lot of time from our technicians, and it distracts from time management per se, and also because a human error might present the improper consulting of the information. Or so basically, that was the baseline for our um, water management institution. When we started it in 1942, when, up until 2010, when we became a directory or direction, or and we started doing the improvements here. I'm representing how it was done back then, and also want to tell you that we only had one regional office where everything, every tramit that was done regarding water resources had to go through that single office. So, like, as I was mentioning, the computers that we had and that we all knew that were this in our uh, consultation platform was basically that a person will call and we will physically verify the file. And so that's what we were doing and knew, and back then were aware of. So that's basically how we started. So challenges and difficulties. One of the main one was the information migration to a new database. We're talking about uh, maybe from the year 2000 to today. The technological change has been radical, so information becomes dated, and same with software. So one of the most important parts of doing this or generating these change towards more efficient database like an Oracle one. We're talking about licensing and how to fill this database. Transfer of information from printed to digital format at the beginning was made by hand with some of our colleagues. They will transfer that information manually, and that's how we started feeding or yeah, filling our database. And also another challenge is how to standardize the processes. So there were used to be a lot of logistics, so we needed to identify each of the steps to better understand the behavior and how to better organize that database. Within this information that was included and revised, we needed to check the quality of the information. In many occasions, we needed to do field inspections and visit our users to verify the type of information that was there. So we also try to improve as we were including the information in the database, and that allow us to uh, obtain a lot of revised information. And once we have that, we might provide better information and absorb information from other institutions, and that's where it the coordination part, the interinstitutional coordination comes into place because many other institution works with water resource. So we have also people working in their own silos, and but now the idea is to access this information. And the way we did it was by having a legal backing of the tool through a national decree stating that we have the official platform for the management of the water resources and all everything that has to do with it, including studies and so on. So that helped us a lot because allow us to even improve more and clear our vision. And so mm, I think you went over a slide. Hold on. No, it's not there. I think you repeated. But the idea is that nowadays we have five regional offices. We have servers with enough capacity. We're still lacking, but we are much better placed or positioned with technology. And our apps and our consulting base is completely online. And much of what we have nowadays is done by the user in an automated way. In other words, they can check the status of their processes or stage of their requests. All we do have as an income are the canons. In other words, when we grant water use, we charge utilization fee and also for contamination. The implementation process started, and I think in many countries occur the same way. It's because the resource is limited. We are impacted by a climate change, and also our resources are very vulnerable. And so that made the PNGRA established the creation of an information system on water resources that allow us to incorporate even data and informations that were scientific and true to see the state of the water resource. And so you can see there, what we have is what we want to do is have a technological well, he's actually written to preserve and disseminate data and information related to water resources and their management through a technological platform with timely and expedited access for users in public and private entities, communities, and the general public. And that's what we're working on right now. And the way we did it was with the water direction with the we developed uh, work for the development of the platform. We developed reference terminals, and it was uh, the direction of water in 2010 and got independent and obtained their own budget. And with that, we were able to invest and allow us to generate the system. Something before I talk about the systems, it was to identify what we wanted to do. We had different institutions that generated information, and then we were wondering where we were going to allocate that information. And so then we started with the ICE, the INVU, and municipalities and other government entities that generate information that we wanted to serve as repository in our institution, and that was also available for other institutions, the Costa Rican Water Institute or Ministry, and the SINA, Tenara, and other users, governmental entities and users, and other third parties as well. What we wanted to store and here were tables, documents, sync files or geographical files through web services and links and emails, everything digitally, and that people will have access to that information. So we designed, once we knew what we wanted, we designed the platform to gather and have a maps of Visor web portal concession system, which is the CIMASTIR, um, which is a monitoring system for underground waters at a real time. And we now are monitoring several uh, wells and also on hourly base and are sent to our servers to see the current state of them. What do we do with all this information? Well, uh, first of all, uh, it allows us to organize that information and see the available amount of layers that we have. We have about 150 layers of information. That also depends. We have about 40 to 50 layers. The others we have worked with other institutions to provide public access, and also our layers are updated every 24 hours. So what's included today, tomorrow will be reflected in our servers. And also we develop web applications different to the desktop applications, which allows for our users and workers can access even from their mobile phones to work on them and also to make their research or searches. We're also working with the information node in the National Territorial Information System, where we identify everything that is related to the water resource, and also the implementation of digital requests for we implemented it priorly with the but with COVID, we got an advantage because now our users can do their tramits or requests digitally. Now we're also developing videos, creating videos on how to get into the system. For example, simple things like a video where the user can see how can they collect their coordinates, uh, and so taking that type of tramit or process could be difficult, but if we can simplify it so that the user can actually follow it in a simple video, would be very helpful when we provide those guidelines to the user. The results are, well, we have our start product is our map visor, or where we can see all the advantages or all the permits granted, and it indicates the usage. We have identified 8 uses for the water, and we can see who has it, the time, the period of time, the amount, what type of um, source it is, and you can see it through our map. We are also monitoring the rivers, which is a challenging project as well because we are publishing and doing monitorings. In Costa Rica, we have two seasons, which is the dry and season and the rain season. So for uh, so we have two indicators. Um, the Dutch ones, and I forgot the other, and I apologize for that. But we have territorial planification or planning as well, and not a lot of this. Our sources have a protected areas. So for permits of granting, this is consulted. Also the hydrography, we have some projects there. We can see large projects like the one we have done with the ULGS, who we did a 150-meter kind of like sample or radiography, and 30 meters as well to see what we have in terms of water resource. And this help us improve. Also on our website, users can do their searches. Um, we have digitalized a majority of the file. So with the email, they will receive the file in a digital format in an expedited way. We also have the tramits per se. Also, we have the UGC services with uh, the WMS and WFS, which the user, whereas it's private or public, can console their information on systems, and they can connect them, and so they can do the consulting, I mean the searches and find the information. I think we provide a lot of access to the information for the users. I know we have to improve in many ways. We have layers from some institutions like A&A, Senara, and other institutions that generate information on the water resources, and we have included them here. We have to improve, of course, but also in terms of, like, for example, updating and the metadata, and that we are working on little by little, but the information is available, which is very important. Um, I think that would be it. Any comment or question, feel free to make them. Jesus, thank you very much. It was very useful, especially to notice that Costa Rica has a significant advancement, especially for these platforms that you are currently using and applying on a daily basis. And in this context, we've seen certain questions that would be interesting that you could address. One that has to do with the cost estimation and time that it has taken to develop and implement this system. The cost has been big or great. I know we have invested a lot, and this has allowed us to also be more efficient and provide better information and be more transparent. I don't have the precise cost, uh, but I can ask the person that has it, and I can provide it via email. You have my email there in the chat, or I can provide it. The other question is how long has that taken to develop the platform? Well, that platform has taken about 7 to 8 years to develop. We started with very basic things, but little by little we have been improving it and widening the applicability of it, and it has allowed us to escalate, especially the technological part with water resource. There's another question that has been made from some participants regarding the process that uh, involves uh, the quality of the data and validation of them, which is very important to know. How do you validate the data that you receive, and how do you do that quality control of them so that they effectively become part of the database, so they can be used? Well, regarding validation and data usage, we carry them as raw data that are stored. It takes a little bit longer, the processing and validation. We are working on how to automate that, because right now it's manually made by 2 to 3 people, and it takes a lot of time. We are mainly doing it manually. So it is time consuming. However, we are projecting and planning. We have bought software for implementation of automation of the management of this information. In many occasions, a lot of the data is just raw data. We are not limiting the information, but we actually do say that the data has that say handicap or factor that it has not validated yet. So in that sense, it's taking a lot of time to do the validation, but we generating 2 times a year, updating and validation of the data. Okay, so thank you, Jesus. I would like to know if Maria Eugenia is available, if you can hear me. Maria Eugenia, can you answer a question that was made after the presentation? How can you make us understand how the countries that are participating can benefit from this initiative? What will be the mechanisms that participant countries can have benefits or by OLAS, for example, or obtain benefits from OLAS? Thank you for the question. The OLAS comes emerges as um, uh, a result of the need of the countries had uh, of compiling, collecting, validating the data, and all being able to share it between them. So the opportunities that all us provide is to be able to compare with other countries, but also, as I mentioned, to do this the work that is being done at a methodological level, the analysis of the surveys that are being done that you can find in the OLAS part where you can see the documents, all that it has related to surveys that countries did, and so you can see uh, or compare the type of questions they use and data points like that. And I think those resources can help other countries to precisely identify how to improve the generation of information. We will also be doing these assessments, country assessments that will allow us to identify the gaps and challenges for the informational management and also to create a roadmap with the results of the surveys and assessments, and everything will be available at the OLAS platform. So we believe that there are several elements that, or tools and functionalities that will continue consolidating and will allow to provide better tools for the countries for the information management. No, okay, thank you, Dr. Henya. Um, I will ask you all to take a little break because we have been here for almost 2 hours, and I think it's important that we can just take a break to stand up and come back in 10 minutes so we continue with the panel discussion afterwards. So please do not close or touch anything. Just leave everything as it is and just go and come back in 10 minutes. Thank you.
extend so much because we are already late. And I guess
Okay, now we will continue with a small panel, which is Maria Eugenia, that we have her previous Olas, and Mr. Chris Corbin, which is a program officer uh, environment and the miss and the lady with the Cartagena environmental institution. We also have the participation of Lisa Kirkland, which is from she's a coordinator of basins in the Department of Ecosystem Management for the Environmental Agency and Planification from Jamaica, NEPA. Welcome, Lisa. So now I will handle the floor to Eberhard so that he can lead us and also mediate with some of the questions that we have received in the chat. Thank you very much. Thank you, Julio. This panel has the objective of exchange between you and maybe even with me some opinions on four questions that we formulated in the invitation that you received. We will, I will repeat each question so that we are clear on what do we want to talk about. What are the challenges in our countries, partner countries, to establish uh, data platforms that are trustworthy for the water sector? Number two, is what could our partner countries do to improve the current situation? Number three, it refers to the type of technical assistance and financial aid that would be adequate or necessary or useful to improve our current situation. And lastly would be what could no, can a data platform, a regional data platform, help boost or increase the quality of data for the different purposes in the context of the water resources? Can a regional level exist a platform that improves the development of norms, regulations, and data quality in our different countries? That's saying that what are the Caribbean countries, not necessarily uh, countries from the continent, from the American continent. So I'd like to handle the floor to Maria Eugenia, and so that she can start with the first question in the context of the challenges that our countries are, the partner countries are facing to establish the platforms per se. Can you I mean the mic, please? Okay. Regarding the challenges, I think I mentioned it in my presentation, and I think it was clearly presented in the case of Trinidad and Costa Rica's case. And I And it has to do with this fragmented work or siloed work that is being done in the sector. And so, in a way, to me, the main challenge is a collaboration that can be generated between the different stakeholders working in the water sector. And by that, I mean not just the government institutions, but also talk about other type of stakeholders at regional or sub-regional levels, the collaboration that might occur between universities and institutions that in many occasions work with the sector and have information, but they cannot integrate it. Uh, so to me, that's the main challenge, and of course, it would be the part related to the resources, both human as financial for the implementation of the mechanisms, the proper mechanisms, and that in many occasions goes beyond the platforms themselves. And I think that's important to highlight because the platform it's one of the elements of informational system. So we need to build and be clear about who will be collecting the data and with what frequency and how will we validate the information so that we can incorporate it to the platform. So having the human resources and material ones to create this informational system is one of the challenges that we have to uh, improve or try to improve and or figure out how to improve. Same question for Chris so that it can uh, answer it from your perspective, from what are the challenges that our countries have or in a region. Uh,
Just building up from that last comment in terms of some of the data challenges. So as was rightly said, I think that the platform is a tool. It's really just a tool. So we certainly see challenges at all levels of the data cycle. From the standpoint of the generation of the data, the storage of the data, how is this data analyzed? Having proper visualization of the data for decision support systems, the mechanism through which data is making or for the general public. We are seeing challenges, for example, in data that might be considered more sensitive, water data sharing arrangements. Even within governments, we think that that is key. So, as has been mentioned, I think it does come down a lot to capacity. I think there are weak capacities within different aspects of that data management and use of the platform. I fully agree that there definitely needs to be more intersectoral collaboration and coordination. The issue of water and by extension wastewater management covers so many different sectors, and everyone is looking at it in a very siloed way. But for effective decision making and policy setting, we do need to have systems that speak to each other and that are integrated and that can be used in a systematic way. So those are some of the challenges. Certainly, the experiences of Costa Rica and Trinidad and Tobago exemplified that how difficult it is, even in a small island, to bring all these sectors together. So yes, I think that would be our perspective as well.
Muchas gracias, Chris. La misma pregunta lo paso a Lisa.
hand the floor to Lisa. And how do you see those challenges in order to have a good platform, especially transparent with transparent data for the different tasks that have to be met in the water sector?
Same issue. Collaboration, agency have different mandate, therefore they are driven by different aspect for the data. Some of the data are used to earn income, so we have to look at that as against other agency that gives their data freely. The cost of establishing the platform, where will it be housed, who will be responsible, what's the cost, the human resources. These are all situations that we find we're facing because Jamaica ideally had wanted to establish a database similarly, and a MOU has been signed between the three agencies that are responsible for such. We haven't gone a far way, as was stated, the different mandates, the different legislation, the cost, the sensitivity of data. Certainly at NEPA, we house a lot of sensitive data. And is it that we're going to have a secret say or some data are removed? The different standards that govern the different legislation in a country. Um, each agency would like to see their data, and we're also looking at the SDG 6. So, in order to what Jamaica would say, use one seed and feed many birds, we have to think collaboration, use one platform to fulfill the responsibility of the countries for themselves internally, the responsibility that SDG 6 requires, and also what is it that our other stakeholder partner agency requires. So at the end of the day, we have a win-win situation for all involved. So that's how we're looking at it. At the end of the day, everybody must benefit.
Ok, gracias Lisa. Creo que fue muy ilustrativo de saber.
The second question. So we will start with Lisa, Chris, and to Maria Eugenia. So Lisa, the second question would be, what could Jamaica do or other countries that you perhaps are aware of to improve the current situation? What efforts are being currently made that could be used as an example that for me as a country can use to improve the current situation?
Stated earlier, we need to collaborate and decide what it is we want. Are we going to look for the SDG or the parameters that are required? How is it that we're going to, the methodology that is to be used, the platform, the resources that are necessary? So we have to come and decide on how is it that we're going to do this. So we have to have a collaborative stakeholders group that we agree that in going forward, this is the methodology that will be used. These are the parameters that we'll be looking at. These are the country's priorities. These are the SDG priorities. How is it we're determining the methodology so that at the end of the day, all the necessary steps, all the necessary examples that the countries want to fulfill are fulfilled. So, as a group, as a partner in Caribbean group, we have to work together to identify the gaps, the resources that are necessary, the roadmap that we'll be taking, and we have to agree on it, and not only agree on these things, but to do it, to implement it. Have a platform or a group that we can bounce things off easily. But once we have agreed on a roadmap and a timeline, we have to stick to it and implement same.
Ok, muchas gracias. Chris, ¿qué piensas tú que se puede hacer en los países?
A few that I think that we can build on. We have global and regional systems. We saw the excellent presentation from Costa Rica. We saw the tool that's being developed by IDB. I think there's a lot of opportunity for South-South cooperation within our region. countries learning from the experiences of others. I think we can take some of these global and regional platforms and, as Lisa said, try to determine how best do we customize this for our own national and local circumstances. So we have a sense of harmonization. But at the same point in time, we don't try to recreate the wheel. We utilize some of the systems that we have. Lisa made mention, I think, of a very important point. In some cases, we're not exactly sure what we need, what capacity do we need. And I think there's an important need to do that sort of assessment on a country by country basis. What resources do you need, whether it be financial and technical? What sort of hardware and software? What sort of capacity will you need, not just to collect the data once, but to continue collecting the data so that you can measure trends over time? And I would say that just to close, that these various global commitments, like the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goal 6, but even at the regional level, and the intergovernmental processes which we have in Central America through the CCAD, and the English speaking Caribbean through CARICOM, and the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, I think there's an opportunity to use those governance mechanisms to help really profile this issue of data management and the use of data. And of course, projects like CReW Plus, they can't solve the problem fully, but can the countries be strategic in seeing how they can utilize these different regional projects to actually advance their national priorities? Over.
Muchas gracias, Chris. Y paso a María Eugenia con la pregunta un poco diferente. Hola.
In relation to the current situation. Oh, so what can they do? Okay, Everhard. Um, as I was mentioning in my presentation, nowadays we are working on country diagnosis is in 4 countries from the region: Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and Peru. And precisely, we are doing this exercise that Chris was mentioning and that Lisa also mentioned, which is to be able to identify firstly what do we have within the sector, and based on that, define this roadmap or critical roadmap to improve the information management. So the idea is to have it for every country, because definitely we are clear about that. If we don't understand, in other words, we firstly have to understand what we have to in order to be able to build a platform, because it is not created from scratch. um, okay, so the thing would be also to see if you can group countries in a single platform, or that if you have to do it individually. Is that something you have discussed already? Yeah. Well, what we have seen in the countries is that at least in these countries, there are several platforms. In fact, there are several institutions that have done this systematization of the information exercise. So what we see, at least in these 4 countries, is that we're talking about how to better collaborate, so that those platforms communicate between them, and that we can then have a better national database. But undoubtedly, within some other contexts, especially when there's no, let's say, platform, or a platform that is not at least enough to encompass what wants to be monitored. So these regional platforms would be ideal or an option. So something that Chris just mentioned, and I think it's key, is that creating a platform, it's simple. In other words, obtaining financing to hire a company to generate a platform and put beautiful graphs is easy. But what one should be looking for is how to sustain that platform in time. Who will be providing that information, and that we have the financing to do that, and the stakeholders utilize it. So we need to take that into account when conceptualizing, and maybe having regional platforms will help us to make it more efficient in terms of the usage of the resources and maintenance in the long run. Chris and Lisa, do you want to comment on this that Maria Eugenia mentioned?
About having platforms that are both used and usable and actually respond to a need at the country level and at the regional level. And I think that's where, as was mentioned earlier, the engagement of the stakeholders is so important. And I do see there is a value for regional frameworks and regional platforms. In some cases, they encourage or they drive or they help facilitate what's needed at the national level. In some cases, we recognize that there's a capacity constraint at the national level. But the idea is that a regional level platform is not a substitute for a national level either. It really should be an opportunity that there's a seamless flow of information from local to national to regional and ultimately to some of these global frameworks. I think it's also useful in the context that, like a region like the Latin America and the Caribbean, there's so much opportunity for joint approaches, particularly as it relates to transboundary issues on water and water pollution and wastewater management. So I think these regional frameworks are going to be very useful for building consensus in decision making on joint policies. But it really is about, identifying what are the most appropriate parameters we need to have documented at a regional level, what's the most appropriate we have at a national level, and then what would be the most appropriate even at the watershed level, where very local specific decisions need to be made. Over.
Lisa, ¿qué piensas tú, por ejemplo, como un país
Vision that creating those regional platforms takes time. And in many occasions, the institution requires decision making faster. So, is there a way to build a platform, the national way, locally or nationally as decision makers, but at the other hand, contribute to a regional platform?
First time I have seen where we have a report of the state of the convention era, which is very important. It is not the bile and whatever, but we have started, and I'm very excited about that because we can use the data from there. We can use lessons learned from the SOCAR because essentially it is a gathering of data in the region, putting it together, looking at various parameters, and the SOCA is a very good example because going through the processes, we see where country have different standard, different parameters. This is essentially a coral reef island. This is landmass, and we see all the differences. But we're still able under SOCAR to put all of these differences and to create a platform and and present something for the region. And that's what I'm thinking. Similarly, we have to have the country database platform, yes, which will lead seamlessly, we want, into a regional database. So we need to have that. So in terms of timeline, let us not invent the wheel. We have excellent example, as was stated earlier. Let us build on these things. In my mind, from we finish the first SOCAR, we should have continued. The aim was to continue, and essentially is to build up the database, a regional, which we have already been working with, and a number of countries, and we have ideas, and we have identified gaps and resources needs. So my suggestion, in order to cut the time, look on all of these things. The SOCA is a very good example that we have used and we can build on, and we already have established linkages and network with these groups. Let us use these and not create anything, just use these systems that have worked. We have learned a lot from our Caribbean partners, our Latin American partners, and yeah, and at the end of the day, we could also have a SOCAR too with all these platforms being linked. And as I said, it's a win-win situation for all because we can put all we're signatories to a number of convention, the regional, a number of convention, a number of treaties, a number of things. So if this platform can be used to identify and to store, to disseminate all of these requirements under these convention, it would be excellent. And we're not creating anything from the start.
Muchas gracias, Lisa. Y voy
Type of technical assistance and financial aid would be required in order for us to move forward in creating and use platforms both locally or nationally as at a regional level that are trustworthy for the usage of the different demands that people has. To me, the main support that we could provide to countries is to support this exercise that from LOLAS we are encouraging, which is the country diagnostics or assessments. So every country that wants to improve their data should have this type of assessment and roadmap. So that would be the first support line. Secondly, that I think Lisa mentioned before is this exchange like the one we're having today to learn lessons on implementation of other platforms and generation of data. Uh, that's or like what you're saying, not reinvent a wheel. We need to know what is being done in other countries to see if we can take advantage of those realities or exercises they are making already. Also the formation of capacities, because I think many people in the sectors, perhaps we're engineers, we're not economists. So in many occasions, we perhaps don't know how to do the data analyze or statistical analysis. Maybe strengthen the knowledge the institutions have or the work on the sector in terms of data management, especially for decision making. I think it's crucial. And finally, regarding specifically on the informational platforms, I think um, we can develop a technical assistance program to generate that knowledge base that can be utilized by different countries. Perhaps I'm not that clear for on what Lisa says. For example, that each country should have their database, but at the same time, there are data that perhaps can be shared, like what Chris was mentioning too, regarding the management of water resources, or perhaps at a regional level that can be used, and perhaps some countries have certain countries that have just information that is relevant to their countries alone. So it's important that when we are generating this data information and make it available, well, that can be for common use, should be relevant, and that could be part of that technical assistance that we could allocate. And also put there all the methodological part recommendations, the lessons learned from the questions used on the surveys, for example. I think that will be useful. And something else I wanted to bring here is that there are several innovation tools that we have that we should be exploring beyond surveys. For example, there are additional resources to collect information. So perhaps we can work on that line too through technical assistance, and that might be interesting to do as well.
de UNEP que
As technical assistance, especially Could you think about to go beyond to what's being done today in the group process context?
Was going to say that we would ask the Inter American Development Bank for assistance, but no, seriously, I think some of the opportunities that we have even outside of CReW Plus. You've heard that from Trinidad and Tobago, and I promise we did not bribe our speaker to say nice things about UNEP and the Cartagena Convention Secretariat. But I think it was realized that the investment that we have from CReW Plus is just going to start a process in development of those water information management systems. So I think we have to continue to look for the external opportunities through larger projects where we build in activities and direct support. But it doesn't mean that we only have to depend on external projects. And certainly through UNEP, we do see an opportunity to support the capacity building and the training. I think that is so important, as has been mentioned. But we need to know who we are training and what we are training them in so that we can have that level of sustainability. I particularly like the opportunity for the exchanges, the technical professional exchanges. I think that's something that many of us as organizations can facilitate. I think a webinar like this is one example, but in some cases, to actually have experts visiting other countries and seeing how do they manage their data, how do they enter it, how do they manipulate it, I think is very key. And then we have to, I would say something that UNEP through our secretariat can also do is really bring in the network and the expertise. And I think that doesn't just apply to UNEP, it applies to the IDB and the GIZ and many other partners, is that we there's a broad range of expertise that we have developed. There are a broad range of partners, both within academia and technical institutes. But I think we almost have to do a bit of matchmaking to be able to identify what are the needs and to be able to approach these experts in the region that can provide that type of support. There's one final area I wanted to mention, and it perhaps is a bit different from our core topic, and that's the sort of integration of what I call the freshwater data with what's happening on the coastal and marine environment. And it's something that we did look at in an earlier consultancy under CReW Plus, so that we're also looking at not just data in a strict potable freshwater data as opposed to coastal marine water quality data. And I think something that we can do as a secretariat and UNEP working with partners is actually bringing together water utilities with persons who are dealing with the coastal and marine issues, for example, wastewater pollution. And I think that's an important mechanism. We need to have more intersectoral cooperation on this issue. Over.
Okay. Muchas gracias, Chris. La pregunta a Lisa, como país técnica y también financiera, realmente sería necesario para que Jamaica, por ejemplo, tendría
Is required, and how can you at the same time build or help build a regional platform with relevant data? What Chris and Maria Eugenia have proposed would be enough, the type of aids to move forward on this path.
Level now. So I'm thinking in terms of the gap that is identified at the country level. I think that is where we will need assistance. Yes, I have training is important. In terms of assisting, I know in terms of getting reliable data, I think that we should have a QMS system for all the region, all the countries, because we want our data to be reliable. We don't want to be second guessing the quality of our data. So we must incorporate a quality management system. However, I mean, some of our countries are in the process of getting accreditation. That would be great. That would be wonderful. But if not, we should have, so that at the end of the day, data is credible and reliable. I'm thinking of in terms of the dedicated platform. Some country may need help with that. They, as was stated earlier, they are in silos. I have Microsoft, you have GIS, whatever. So there, it is a must that there's a regional, there's a local level platform, maybe a MOUs like Jamaica had started, so that we have a standardization in terms of metadata. We know everything that is, so we're comparing apples with apples. So it has to be standardized along all the region, all the countries. We need to have an understanding of that. So probably we'll need assistance in terms of methodology. What's the best way? And IDB had stated that the country's diagnostic, probably from there we'll be able to feed into to see what is the best methodology using various countries in the region. This is what we're finding. So we need our methodology. So essentially what I'm looking at, we need assistance in terms of um, our training or looking at identifying our gaps. I can see the diagnostics being used, and from identifying our gaps, we are able to find resolution in looking at other country, how this is dealt with. So it's training, it's technical assistance, the expert exchange, that sort of thing, coming at my lab, looking at my lab in terms of best practices, that sort of thing. So in addition, we need the training, best practices, technical advice, a QMS is a must, and dedicated software.
Ok, gracias, muchas gracias, Lisa. Y creo que
A way. We have a way to go still to achieve what the different countries need, and also at a regional level what's needed. And I want to really thank you in today's session because we are already late. Um, um, so now I want to hand the floor. I think I have one more question from one participant, but I think I think we should leave it for later on or perhaps for tomorrow. But now I want to hand the floor to Julio for a summary of the day without forgetting to invite you to tomorrow. It's going to be a very interesting day, and it would be a day where we will have an exchange with a country from Africa. And my peers and ex-peers from Zambia will be available for tomorrow, even to tell you how they have been able to move forward with the regulatory system for the water and water sanitation. So now I'll handle the floor to Julio for that summary and for what would be the agenda that we will continue to discuss from now on. Thank you, Everhard, and all our presenters and members of the panels. There's a lot to summarize, but as Everhard was mentioning, perhaps tomorrow we will provide a better summary. But what I want to highlight today, briefly, are that we have to realize that we are um, uh, undertaking a challenge that, on one hand, has to do with governance, coordination, and interinstitutional work, and with sectors as well. And on the other hand, something that is more technical, which is the platform itself, the necessary capacities, human capital, and financial resources To me, in that sense, I thought it was very interesting the perspective from Trinidad that is starting this process where precisely they did that exercise of defining uh, the scope and framework. And as other presenters highlighted and panel members, that start from a base, realizable ambition, and from then scale it gradually with the support of international platforms and utilization of current tools and the cooperation agencies, but go step by step. And we also have the Costa Rican case that demonstrate that is something that is not done from one day to the other, but we can think on a development system that could be modular or step by step, but starting it from initial vision that dimensions or or it states what we want at a national level and then as at a regional level, and so that we can see what we are adding to it and actually getting also support at a regional level and benefiting from that. So we will get in depth tomorrow, and you're very welcome to participate in our session. And now I'll handle the floor to Pedro Moreo for closing. Not before requesting you that in the chat, if you have a minute, please help us with a little survey that help us improve both the organization as well as the content. There's a link, and please just fill it as you hear Pedro Moreo. Thank you. Thank you. Just to be brief, I want to thank all the participants, presenters, and members of the panel. I think the contributions have been great, and especially thank Julio and Everhard because they brought this idea together. And we thought it might have been physical, not virtual, but unfortunately we are still here. But this dynamic is what we have been wanting to create and provide the different experiences from the different stakeholders. And it's important to highlight that one of the main goals from CReW is to collect and gather these efforts that we have been doing in support of the each countries. And I think that these at the end, working on the different aspects of the project and policies, financing, and technical solutions, we see that the data and information is something basic, something that sets the baselines to move forward with the other elements, especially and the reforms, as it was mentioned, to have a strong system and policies in the country will help us generate those necessary mechanisms to cover the whole sector. And I think that's what's the most important thing. Um, and so I invite you for tomorrow. Everhard and Julio also, yeah, you're invited for the 2 hours that we will be having with this same dynamic, where we will bring to the table the experience of other water operators, a key partner that we have in the moving forward of all these planning and efforts in the sector. And with that, I think we can close this workshop and say goodbye to all of you. Still good morning in the region, good afternoon, and good night to other areas. And please take care.